and it was white Christians who abolished it, starting with the
Absolutely,
Brits,
sure,
to their
sure. And
credit.
something else while we're on this, Matt, we have to mention Cassius Clay. And I don't mean the boxer. No, I mean the man who pushed Lincoln to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. The man who was born into slave ownership, but he became an abolitionist and somebody who fought valiantly against slavery. And Cassius Clay, the boxer, was convinced by this young girl that Cassius Clay was not a name of honor, but he was an abolitionist. It was a man who was threatened with death because of his stand
So
regarding
he,
the
so he
dignity of,
changed. So
of
he
African.
changed his name to Muhammad, who's like the greatest slave catcher and traitor and oppressor of all history.
Exactly, and who was white. Who was
And
white.
and yes, and bringing it right to July of 2020, the NFAC, the No Effing Around Coalition,
Yeah,
led by this guy named Grandmaster Jay, whose
yeah,
real name is John Fitzgerald Johnson, who used to be a rapper, and he's an IT guy and a lot of other things.
yeah,
But Grandmaster Jay is truly a rapper. He is an orator. If you
yeah,
give him 30 seconds or 3 hours, he will fill it with an awesome rap. Okay, so that's his
yeah,
talent. So he's able to lead people. On 4th of July, he led the first NFAC movement, the Black Guns, spelled with a Z, at Stone Mountain, Georgia. And that was just like his national audition. That was just to get him known among his, future followers.
yeah.
And on this Saturday, July 25th, in Louisville, Kentucky, where there was another police shooting that's notorious to the Black Lives Matter, the shooting of a woman named Breonna Taylor. They want to see, policemen hung, charged with this. He is leading the second Black Guns March to Louisville, Kentucky. You can see it on the internet. The video he's putting out videos. So if he had, say, between 200 and 500 armed, mostly blacks, but I saw some, white BLM types in there. He's saying there will be 5 times more in Louisville, but nobody really knows, including him. He's just put out a national call for angry armed blacks to go to Louisville, Kentucky, and you know where they're going to meet? And he says in the video today that he put out, like the call to arms, he said, not one word of this is by accident, right? Everything is intentional.
Absolutely.
It's Central High School in Louisville. Guess who went there that he mentions? Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali.
Amazing.
So all these things, it's like wheels within wheels. But yeah, he is intentionally going to have the meeting. And you can't bring guns into a high school that I know of, but the high schools are all closed. He's calling the meeting for the stadium, like the high school football stadium of Central High in Louisville, Kentucky, the high school of Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali.
Amazing.
I mean, this guy's got big goals.
Yeah, he does. And let me tell you something. We're on something now that's likened to the French Revolution.
Yes, we are.
And 1917. The both of them.
And 1860. I mean, it's.
Yeah, this is not a joke. When you start to listen,
there's so many currents underneath of us, because there are economic currents where we could have an economic collapse, a bank collapse. There's this pandemic going on, and there are all these social undercurrents. There's a class warfare, Antifa, revolutionary communist undercurrent, and allied with it, temporarily at least, is this Black Lives Matter, NFAC, armed black separatist undercurrent. All of these currents are swirling together, and I don't know what's going to be the Fort Sumter moment, but I think it's going to blow sky high. I really do.
Do you think it's going to happen before the election, at the election, or after the election?
I don't think that at this point it's like a runaway stagecoach going down a mountain road. Nobody can predict which turn the wheel breaks and it goes off the cliff. Well, you know what I mean? But you can tell it's probably not going to get to Silver City intact with everybody in one piece. But which turn it goes off the dirt road, I don't know. But it could be this Saturday in Louisville if some, either by false flag, so a communist that says now is the time, now is the place. If I shoot a magazine into these guys at the stadium, they will blame it on white militia guys, and that will be it. The war is on. So an individual like a Lee Harvey Oswald, okay, an individual can decide now is my moment. Or James Earl Luther King, an individual can decide now is my moment to make a mark on history. And all it would take, how many people in Kentucky have an AR-15 that don't particularly care for black radical communists, or how many communists are there that are just saying somebody has to get this fuse lit, and I'm the guy?
And that reminds me, but go ahead, Matt.
But no matter who shoots into a crowd of NFAC marchers, it will be blamed 100%, 1,000% on white conservatives. Period.
Yeah, of course. Do you know the story of Fidel Castro and the Colombian Civil War?
No.
Let me tell you the story, because it has everything to do with what you're discussing right now. On April 9th, 1948, George Marshall and other military leaders were in Bogota, Colombia, attending a summit.
What did they call that whole period? La Violencia?
Yeah, yes, exactly. And it was, but what basically happened was that on April 9th, 1948, in Bogota, Colombia, members of the military elites from countries throughout the Western Hemisphere were attending a conference on how to fight communism, the surge of communism in the Western Hemisphere. And at the same time, concurrently with that, there was a Pan American Universities Student Union taking place, convention at the same time. And who was attending? Fidel Castro. And Fidel Castro, curiously enough, apparently had hired a young, very poorly educated man with mental problems named, I think if I'm not mistaken, Alberto Roa, who was a peasant and somebody who was an admirer of a left-wing orator who was running for president named Jorge Eliezer Gaitan. And he had gone to Jorge Eliezer Gaitan's office several times. Fidel Castro, on April 9th, 1948, was about to have a meeting with Jorge Eliezer Gaitan, who was a very left-wing politician. He was a defense lawyer, and he was somebody who was considered the heir apparent for the presidency in Colombia. Well, when this happened, the great event that began La Violencia in Colombia, apparently this fellow, Alberto Roa, was hired as a security guard of some sort for Fidel Castro, or by Fidel Castro. And on the way to the meeting with Fidel Castro was a young revolutionary from Cuba at the time, during the pre-communist era. On the way, this young, imbalanced man, for some reason, shot and killed Jorge Eliezer Gaitan.
That was the beginning.
A crowd formed, and he was nabbed. There was a corporal in the police that was nearby. He went into a drugstore, and he was nabbed, and he was killed.
Oh, there's like a lynching. There's like a lynching.
Basically, I don't think he was lynched, but he was killed, and his body was desecrated. And apparently, for who knows what reason or how this was done, he had some literature, some brochures or political literature from the Conservative Party on his person. And this was a guy who apparently liked to hear the speeches of this very left-wing presidential aspirant, Jorge Eliezer Gaitan, whom he killed Think Lee Harvey Oswald and John F. Kennedy. So anyway, long story short, it was absolute, utter bedlam. And there was fighting in the streets. The Army had to be called out. It turned out that a friend of my father's was evacuated from a very hotel where my wife and I actually had stayed. And it set off the spark that ignited a powder keg in which up to 500,000 or even 1 million people were killed on both sides. The conservatives,
for years, and it went on for years.
For years, it went on
And
until
then-
about 10 years.
And this
Maybe
went,
more.
and this barely calmed down when it became the cartels, with those guys, the Cali cartel,
Well, it actually happened. Let me tell you what happened. What actually happened was,
and then FARC. I mean, it's
yes, they were
Colombia
born
has
in this period, and it
and-
was.
And I'm
savage.
not trying to compare America to Colombia, because obviously it's different things. But
Right.
this is 1948. Until when would you say that the FARC period is probably almost over? Early 2000s?
Well, no, the FARC are still. I think they're still at it. I'm really not sure, but
I know, but I mean where you just couldn't even drive across Colombia.
oh yeah, sure, that's correct. Many times you would be driving from one place to another, and you'd have a massive, basically a military roadblock, what appeared to be one, and in fact, the FARC would get a hold of military uniforms. They used to manufacture military uniforms so that members of the FARC could appear as soldiers from the Army.
And look, I'm not. I don't want to distract people thinking this is like a Colombian history lesson. The point of what we're saying. The point of what we're saying is one assassination during a tense period can lead to more than half a century of revolution, violence,
Unbelievable
drug
bloodshed.
more
Unbelievable
revolution,
bloodshed.
country cut in half. Colombia is a rich country. I mean, based on geography and people.
Sure.
The IQ, the beauty of the people, the beauty of the country, the resources in the ground. Colombia could be a rich country like in Argentina in Argentina
In a
in
good
its
day.
potential.
Yeah.
Potential. It's
Right.
not like some horrible Baja. It's not Baja California, or it's got
Sure.
everything, right? It's got
Oh, sure.
2 oceans. It's got mountains. It's got jungles. It's got planos with fertile fields. Great, lots of wealth in the ground and the people. But
Yeah, sure.
this Violencia kicked off in 1948, and it lasted for more than half a century. And anybody that thinks something like this can't happen in America is whistling past the graveyard. We
Absolutely.
are like a little happy Pacific atoll where nothing has ever happened, and we all eat all the coconuts we want, and the women are beautiful and catch fish easy.
The lagoon.
Right, but there are tidal waves coming from 6 directions.
Yes, and Matt, so I want to talk about the book a little bit, because here's why. I think we're at a moment where it's almost every man for himself. And we have to be a little bit like Dan Kilmer, who knows which way the wind is blowing. And so he goes off, he meets this SAS colonel or this officer, this IRA guy, and they go off to Morocco to rescue, and he's reluctant to do it, I think. I think he goes off and he's talked into lending his cargo schooner, to help this operation. And tell us about that, because
he only intends to transport them onto to transfer them to a landing craft, because his goal is to get to the Caribbean and then down to South America. One of his other crew is an Argentine doctor, and I like this because his and I know this for a fact because I've met these guys. His name is in English is Ailman, like Bailman, or spelt like the beer
Right.
ale, M-A-N,
Sure.
and in Spanish it's Alemán. And I actually met, when I was in Spain, I met the head of a Spanish frogman unit who had light brown hair, and so did his wife, and he had blue eyes. and his last name was Aleman. And
Okay.
he said that when the call went out for the Reconquista of Spain from the Moors, so it was like a crusades, but just within Europe to go to Spain to kick the Moors out.
Yeah.
Somebody with a 15-letter German name that nobody could pronounce became the German,
Oh,
and
sure.
so his family name stuck as Aleman.
Which is
So
which is Spanish for German.
right, and in the novel, Victor Ailman's father is a Nazi who gets to Argentina and has a successful second career after the Second World War, but has an affair with a dancer and produces a son who can't be named by the family name. So he's given the hospital, delivery room name of German, Aleman.
Amazing.
Victor Aleman, son of a Nazi officer whose family won't claim him. So he's basically allowed to go through good schools in Argentina. He's funded through schools, university and medical school, but he can never claim the family name. And in the novel, he's yearning to get back to the Southern Hemisphere and go back to Argentina. So the IRA partisan and the SAS colonel, they know from Dan Kilmer's Irish temporary girlfriend that he's heading that way. So you practically have to go right by Morocco anyway to go to Argentina, because
Sure.
you're going to go to the Canaries. I mean, that's how you
Sure.
go. You're going to go from Ireland to the Canaries. And so he convinces them that you really don't have a choice. You're going to take our dozen former Irish Republican Army and SAS. Normally, these are guys that hate each other's guts.
Very strange bedfellows.
Right. They hate each other's guts. But the ex-SAS guys have no access to weapons or explosives because as a former British soldier, you are disarmed. You are permanently disarmed. And there's no way outside of cheap Tom Cruise type movies where an ex-SAS colonel can go to some old contact and get to that mysterious gun room, where they've got the RPGs. That's just Hollywood BS. So they're disarmed. SAS or no SAS, you get no guns in Britain. But the IRA, after the troubles in the 90s, the IRA never
gave up their weapons.
That was one of the points in the peace treaties in the 90s to disarm, but they never did. So for the for the SAS colonel who has all the skill and talented people to go to Morocco armed, he has to make an arrangement with the IRA, because this school in Ireland, the girls' parochial school in Ireland, it's not just Catholic Irish girls or Catholic necessarily at all. It's the families, wealthy families have sent their daughters there to be safe during these troubles in Europe, during the collapse of the economy in Europe. So they think Southwest Ireland is as safe as it can be.
Right, and so and also you something you don't mention, of course, but also the unleashing of the Muslim hordes in Europe who start to take over.
Right. So there's not only English and Irish girls in this school, but in common they have many wealthy parents. So
from many countries,
and the raiders know this and know that they can extort extremely valuable ransoms, which would only be paid in gold. And the typical way that this is done is Somali pirate style, where you parachute the ransom to a GPS coordinate or just to a landmark.
Right.
And so if you ever want to see your daughter again, you're going to have to drop, X pounds of gold into some point in Morocco by airplane that you pay for. Otherwise, we're just going to send your daughter back a piece at a time. Or when the ransom period runs out, and this is actually Sharia law, they do there's a 3-month period which ensures that the girls aren't pregnant. So they're going to have 3 moon cycles for a ransom period. After that, the girls will be auctioned as sex slaves, like 13, 14-year-old girls. So
Think
when I hear,
ISIS.
yeah,
Think
and
ISIS.
or when you think about Epstein and Maxwell, they were pikers compared to these sultans.
Oh,
This
sure.
was standard operating procedure. You just bought 13 and 12, 13, 14-year-old girls. You bought them. The girls had no say at all in anything that happened, ever,
Of course.
because they
So
were
then,
pure sex slaves.
now I don't want to give it away because it's a great story, but Matt, tell us a little bit about the Rebel Yell, that very politically incorrect name for a boat, and what's on the Rebel Yell. Tell us how he had it set up.
Well, this is not a pretty yacht. This is more or less a functional steel trading schooner. So if it's got fresh paint on it, it doesn't look too bad. But if it's a long time between boatyard trips, it looks pretty nasty. But it
Right.
has on the back the Russian version of a 50 caliber machine gun, 12.7 millimeter Dushka, which is like a kind of analogous to a 50 caliber, not quite as heavy duty, but
Right.
similar caliber and similar ballistics that he had bought on another voyage, for paying in gold. Everything by then is paying in gold. I mean, dollars might as well be Confederate money, or
Sure. Absolutely worthless. So
right.
it's a great story. So then, Matt, I mean, do you have another book in the works? Have
Well,
to follow up on.
after Red Cliffs of Zerhoun, I wrote the Bracken collection, which is a lot of my essays about what's going on now in terms of collapse and civil war and other things, short stories as well as essays, and that's my last printed book, the Bracken collection, after Red Cliffs of Zerhoun. If I write another book, I mean, I feel like I wrote the books to help people get ready and warn them.
Yeah.
And in
This is
2020,
not.
the
Yeah.
warning
Go ahead.
period's over. The warning period's done.
Yeah.
If you're not where you need to be now, you got to be moving now, not reading books.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. It's really. I think what this fellow said in his review, very succinct, was that this is basically something that's more prophetic than escapatory reading to just to kill the time.
Yeah,
Not
and
escapist
I'm
at
not
all.
happy about it. I'm not happy about it. I would love to just be writing like genre detective fiction, where Dan Kilmer can sail into Miami and do like Magnum PI kind of fun little
Yeah.
adventures. But I just don't in my heart feel that. I mean, I think that we're at the beginning of a really awful period, like Colombia after 1948. Nobody in 1946 in Colombia thought, no father gathered the children and said, you know what? I'll bet the next 50 years are going to be nothing but violence, drug cartels, communist guerrilla armies, ransoms,
Families
terrorism,
being
bombs.
yes, and it was something, Matt. It was when it happened. It was organized. You would see. Somebody told me this. I lived there a long time. That a whole line of 8 or 10 teams of guys pushing safes that they had just heisted, and it was all organized. They were bringing them to one spot to be able to open them up with acetylene torches and to extract the contents. It was all organized.
Have
And
you
when it
seen the
happened,
videos? Have you seen the videos of this column of armored vehicles in Mexico today? Like
no, I
100
haven't.
armored vehicles with machine guns on them, owned
Where
by
are they going?
cartel. They just show it's a demonstration of force by a cartel. And the intention is that, like in this part of Mexico, if you're a chief of police, you're not going to ever arrest a cartel guy. Because, I mean, how could your little police force, if I just sent 10 of these vehicles to your town, they would wipe you
Exactly.
out off the earth. So it's like more than 100 vehicles with belt-fed weapons and camouflage, matching
Sure.
camouflage. And
RPGs.
the camera just goes down the line, vehicle after vehicle, like 100 vehicles. And it's just a demonstration to Mexicans, to Mexican law enforcement. You won't dare to even, if the Mexican central government comes and says, we need your help to arrest some guy, you're not going to even listen.
Yeah. We're in a similar situation because Black Lives Matter is that and obviously it's a little bit different, but they're feared, and they fear them because they know that a mob of people can go and destroy your business, can go into your headquarters and go in and firebomb it. People can be killed.
And the local DA will release them and maybe charge you for defending it.
Yeah, sure. Like this couple in St. Louis, amazing story, and these people who were, I think, helped, BLM types, because the husband was an attorney, and now what do they believe about BLM?
Well, and the guy, from what I have learned, and I'm not positive about this because I've only been reading fragmentary stuff, but this mansion that he lives in today was semi-derelict. It was like in a formerly wealthy but rundown, nobody can afford to live there. It's the roof is collapsing kind of a neighborhood.
Right.
And he has put millions into restoring the house. And
beautiful home.
This is it's like Architectural Digest museum piece. But this guy has put millions of dollars into the city of St. Louis in restoring a home like that and paying property tax on it. I used to work on mega yachts, and I've been around private jets. And there's a mindset about mega yachts and private jets is that they're just some toy of a billionaire or a millionaire. But a mega yacht, a $10 million mega yacht costs 15% per year forever to keep it the way that it is. So somebody spends $10 million to build a mega yacht or a private jet. They're going to spend more than $1 million a year for the crew, the paint, everything. Upgrades to the electronics over, amortized. This is like, as opposed to, say, a rich guy building a gold statue of himself one time.
Yeah, sure.
So the guy, the McCloskeys, you can say, oh, he's some rich guy, burn his house down. Do you know how much he paid to the city of St. Louis? It was like a gift to the city. He could have moved to Montana.
Of course.
He could have built from the ground up in Montana and then put a big statue of himself out front and never faced a risk. He restored like a century-old mansion. And you can imagine when you restore a century-old mansion, they didn't have sheetrock. They had like plaster, and the roof doesn't even, the slate roof, you can't even replace it. It's cost more to restore something like that.
Oh, yeah, that's like rebuilding a house.
And so it's a century-old mansion. The money that he handed to the city of St. Louis and the thanks he got was to be charged as a felon for defending it with a weapon. Well, the lesson from that is get the hell out of anywhere that's run by Democrats.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
This is setting up a dynamic. It's already ongoing, but now the flood, the trickle is turning to a flood. People are getting out of Manhattan. They are abandoning properties. This is similar to what happened in Detroit after the 1968 riots. Detroit used to be one of the richest cities in America.
Oh, yeah.
You can go on Google and look at like mansions of Detroit, and they're like better than the McCloskeys' home, but they've got their roofs collapsed, with trees growing through the roof. Because after the 68 riots, the people who could leave left, and the tax base was gone. Well, that process is now happening in places like Manhattan. I mean, people are walking, and you know who's going to so if you've got a 40 condo unit in Manhattan, where the rent is like, $3,000 a month for a studio apartment, right? And it's like $5,000 to $6,000 a month for a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom.
Yeah, sure.
People are leaving there. Guess who's going to fill those vacancies? Welfare cases.
Section 8.
Section 8. And then who is going to stay and pay that $4,000 a rent when your neighbor is getting it for free and trashing the place? That's what happened to Detroit. So this process is now going into fast forward, and American blue cities are going to totally collapse.
Sure. And then the question is, though, Matt, is people flee California because it's impossible to live there. The taxes are too high. The policies are too stupid, and the streets are too filthy. What will they do? They'll go to Texas maybe, but how will they vote?
I think that they're going to
this an aberration.
not like that used to be the cliche that they would move to Arizona and then turn it into California. But something that's happening in the last couple months is a unbelievable amount of first-time gun purchases.
Yes.
This is why you can still find AR-15s, but you can't find a Glock 19, because that normie that thought he could get through life without ever owning a gun, when he buys his first gun, what's he going to ask for? He doesn't know what a Sig Sauer is. He doesn't know what a Heckler Koch is, right? He's going to walk into the gun store and say, I need a Glock. Well, get on the list, because the last 100 guys like you also wanted a Glock. So these guys that are in their midlife are buying their first gun, they're not voting for Biden.
Yeah, I think that they're very concerned. And, it's problematic, to say the least, that that we've got a situation here where, their reaction, their own visceral reaction to the violence is, I need a gun, but does it translate into a consciousness of thought that maybe the people that are against me having a gun are people that are really against my best interest, and maybe I shouldn't vote for them?
I think that it does, but I think that we're in a new territory in several ways. Number one, if the election comes down to one or two states where the Democrats just need 20,000 votes, like Florida, Bush versus Gore in 2000, they're prepared now to come out with 100,000 mail-in votes, even if it's a month after the election.
Exactly. This is why the COVID-19 virus is a convenient cover to manufacture votes.
Well, not only a convenient cover, what happens if you have NFAC commandos standing around mixed race polling places and scaring white people away?
Like Philadelphia 2012, remember that?
But with guns this time. Because
of course.
Everybody is learning along the way. They're learning that the federal government is impotent. They went to Portland. Ted Wheeler said boo, and they ran away or went inside the building. They're not even out arresting anybody. Or the McCloskeys getting charged with a felony. So people aren't going to be afraid to do intimidating tactics. And what happens if by October there's a shooting war going on and American cities are like Belfast because some cracker in in Louisville, Kentucky this Saturday says the war starts today. Because when your target is 1,000 people, you don't have to be a great shot. You just got to pull the trigger 30 times and haul ass. And you could be a communist doing it as a false flag, or you could be a white racist doing it so the South shall rise again. I mean, it really doesn't matter, because no matter how it goes down, it will be blamed on white racist crackers who need to give up their guns. Period.
Right. And so what do? They'll come out with their weapons and they'll find the first 100 whites and say, either you give us the money or we'll kill you, and they will kill them. I think that's what could happen. And they'll
go to high-profile gun people, because they know that, like with General Flynn, you can have this Logan Act, 1799. The people say, what the hell is a Logan Act? In 1799, when it took 3 months to get back and forth to Europe, the State Department didn't want some, Matt Bracken showing up in London with some forged documents saying, I represent President Jefferson.
Right.
So the Logan Act said you can't do that. If you're not really sent by the State Department, you can't claim to be representing the United States. That's because there was no telegraph, and it took 3 months. And you could do a lot of trouble in the months that it would take to figure out that some guy was an imposter. But once the telegraph, certainly by the time of steamships and telegraph, the whole thing was a dead letter. But in 2020, what do? They charge Roger Stone with Logan Act. or not, or Flynn. They use Logan Act on Flynn as a pretext, and they charge Roger Stone with equally BS charges. Half of the FBI would be in jail for much worse than what General Flynn or Roger Stone didn't even do. So we can see that there's a totally selective use of the law. One person gets life in prison for jaywalking, and the Democrat, has no bail, released on his own recognizance for a multiple murder, essentially.
Sure.
Well, this lesson trickles down to people. So by the time of the election, you could very well have every polling place a half dozen NFAC guys standing out in front with rifles. And the local police nowhere to be seen.
And then the question is, do they have straw men buying weapons for these people? Many of whom could be former felons or people with a record.
And if this happens, and there are people guarding polling stations, and there's already been lots of shootings, then there's going to be a reaction where somebody's going to say, you can't stand outside of a polling place preventing one group from voting, not while I have a gun, and I see that the police are not responding to 911. The police, I'm getting a busy signal from the official police. So Americans are going to say, I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to go down there, and then no matter who wins the election, in the midst of all this shooting and COVID-19 hysteria, neither side will respect or abide by the result of the election.
Sure, it's exactly. And this is why, they're setting up things for a situation where, Trump would feel justified in saying, well, something, these results are so questionable. The operation of this election, the way it was carried out, was so easy to let's say, violate the compromise, its integrity, that we have to investigate it. Well, which is more than unfortunate.
In 1960, Richard Nixon lost to John F. Kennedy, and the results came down to Texas and Illinois. Late in the night, when Starr County, Texas, found another 50,000, and a similar thing happened in Chicago. So, like Orange County in 2018 congressional elections, you go to bed thinking, hey, the Republicans won. You woke up. What? They found another 100,000 votes. Well, Richard Nixon, for the good of the country, decided to abide by it rather and come back and fight another day than to say, I was cheated. They did not just find 50,000 votes in Starr with 2 R's County, Texas, or in Chicago, Illinois. That was the daily, that was the daily machine. And so This is he could have said, but everybody would have probably talked him down. But in 2020, if that happens, Trump isn't going to say, fine, Biden, you can have it for the good of the country.
He's a brawler.
Whereas Nixon thought, I can come back in 68.
Sure, of course, which he did. I see. I think at that time there was more of a sense of, let's say, love of the country.
Yes.
And but then again, JFK was beginning to learn that Joe McCarthy was telling the truth, and he knew that they were communists and men from secret societies.
And Nixon may not have even necessarily blamed Kennedy per se. It was the daily machine. But for the good of the country, Nixon just folded his hand instead of saying, I'm taking this all the way. But if this happens now in a era when there can be Belfast style shooting and people wearing, the masked people versus the no mask people, it's setting up to be a perfect storm for nobody abiding by the election. So between I would say October, because I'm going back to the wagon, the stagecoach, going down the mountain with the out of control galloping horses.
Yeah, sure.
We don't know how far it's going down the canyon, but we know it ain't gonna make it to Silver City in time for happy hour, right? At the saloon.
Of course, yeah, sure.
Right.
No, it's gonna be It's going to be raucous and it's going to be unpredictable. And
it
they want it that way.
It could start this Saturday in Louisville, or it might happen in October. So I don't think that there's anybody now in a smoke-filled, wood-paneled, room capable of controlling this thing, calibrating it. Like on October the 16th, we'll release the report about Trump's taxes. And I don't think that there's anybody at this point. It's an out-of-control stagecoach with the horses galloping, everybody hanging on, and the wheels are all breaking. But
Sure.
We don't know if it's got 1 mile left or 10 miles left or what. But between now and January 20th, I don't expect at all. And hey, I will be the happiest person to be totally wrong. But I don't expect.
Amen. I feel the same way.
I don't expect Trump or Biden to be like taking a stage for a happy, peaceful turnover of power, because the Democrats didn't even do it the last time. As soon as Hillary lost, they were plotting, like that January 5th meeting, they were plotting how to blow up and sabotage Trump from the inside using the FBI. They were plotting that. They never had any intention of a peaceful transition. And that was in 2016, before COVID, before Black Lives Matter, before any of this trouble. So imagine if there's something on the level of, say, it could be like a Charleston church shooting, Dylan Roof, or it could be a Las Vegas hotel shooter. But imagine how easy it is. I mean, my first novel starts with a shooting into a stadium, and it's a false flag to blame it on the white militia guy,
Sure.
in order to disarm Americans. So imagine how easy it would be if NFAC is meeting in a stadium at Cassius Clay High, right? Central High of Louisville, Kentucky, Civil Rights High, and they're shot, and that doesn't matter who pulls the trigger, it will be blamed on white racists who don't need guns. I mean, it could start then, or it might start, who knows, maybe this whole weekend comes off peacefully like Stone Mountain.
Yeah, Matt, I lost you right when you were saying, when you talked about, imagine we go to you're talking about a stadium. I believe.
Yeah, imagine if somebody shoots into this stadium in Louisville, Kentucky this weekend. No matter who shoots, it will be blamed on white racist gun nuts.
Sure.
It could be proof all over the place that it was a communist that did it. It won't matter. It will be blamed on white racist Trump supporters.
Yeah.
Somebody will
Sure, go ahead. But
that could kick it off as of this Saturday. It's a tinderbox. It's a dynamite factory.
Sure, absolutely. Absolutely. And something, it's funny how the Russians, it turned out later on that, they were trying to tell us that, no, these Texas oilmen, this guy Clint Murchison, he was involved in the assassination. It was the mafia. It was the CIA. It was a conspiracy. And, of course, it was in their interest to say all these things because there was a guy named Lee Harvey Oswald.
Well, the greatest often conspiracies are misconstrued because the real story is preventing official embarrassment. Yeah, Lee Harvey Oswald, on his own dime, traveled to Mexico City and rang the doorbell of the Russian embassy to offer his help in America. A guy who had already been booted out of the Soviet Union. Former Marine, goes to the Soviet Union, becomes a citizen. Then they say, dude, you are too nuts. We will let you go back to America. Take Marina with you. He travels to Mexico City. This is a place where nobody, even before video in film days, nobody goes to the Soviet embassy in a city like Mexico City and is not filmed and recorded, going in and going out.
Sure, absolutely.
So the FBI /CIA, because I'm not quite sure who does surveillance like in a foreign country like that of a foreign embassy, because there's FBI legal delegations at our embassies overseas.
Sure,
but I mean,
the purpose.
But American intelligence sees this former Marine, former communist expat, traitor. He's He's gone from Texas to Mexico City to talk to the Russians, and they didn't know that. They hadn't like checked their videos or their films until after the assassination. So it makes the FBI look totally incompetent.
Right.
I mean, you've got a high-profile lunatic like Lee Harvey Oswald, goes to Russia, gets kicked out of Russia, comes back to Texas, goes to Mexico City to volunteer his services, to the comrades, and the FBI didn't say like, wait a minute, we got to pull this guy in and give him a real good talking to.
Asleep at the switch. We better cover our asses.
Right. So it's better to make it look like any kind of conspiracy than we were just totally incompetent.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Well, listen, Matt, the book, of course, is Red Cliffs of Zerhoun. Your website, is it still enemiesforeignanddomestic.com, Matt?
Yes.
Has that changed?
And my books are available also on Amazon Kindle for ebooks, and they're available on Amazon Audible for audiobooks up to Castigo Key, and I'm almost finished the audiobook for Red Cliffs. But anything digital can be erased. And, if Biden wins, it'll be 1984, and books like mine are going to disappear from your Kindle or your Audible collection. As long as it's hooked up to Wi-Fi, they can pull it out just as easy as they put it in. So
exactly.
I recommend
hardcover. Get the physical.
Get the physical, and if you get it from me, I'll sign it, and then you won't have to give Jeff Bezos half of your money.
Oh, that's mean-spirited. Come on. Oh, that's so mean-spirited.
Jeff Bezos does not need half of your money. Send the money to me and I'll sign it, and Jeff Bezos gets nothing.
That's right.
Anyway, the information's on my website, but you can
enemiesforeignanddomestic.com.
Right, and you can use PayPal or you can use snail mail to my P.O. box. But get my books in hard copy, and if you're not a novel reader, get the Bracken collection, because there's a lot of good information you're gonna want to know going into a dirty civil war. And it was bad enough in Argentina in the 70s. Look at Colombia, 50 years of trouble.
Yeah, no, I was there for part of it. Let me tell you something. It was really bad, and I wasn't even in the worst of it, although I was there during a time where there was a tremendous amount of chaos. But this war between the right and the left tends to be extremely brutal. So
with backstabbing and lying by everybody.
Well, yeah, that goes. Yeah, but that's not even the worst of it. The worst of it is that you get a door knock at 3 a.m, and your family's taken out and they're all slaughtered against the wall. It's that bad.
And you don't even know who did it.
Well, the thing about it is, the other side, the left.
You may or may not even know who when your dad goes missing, you don't even know who grabbed him.
During this time, it was a time where people on the way to church, on the way to mass, would be murdered. It was very, very evil. And, so with that in mind, we better fight for our country because it's up for grabs in 2020. So, Matt Bracken, Enemies Foreign and Domestic, the Red Cliffs of Zerhoun. Go ahead.
Thank you, Bill.